I stood there, trembling in white lace, as the pastor asked if I took this man for better or worse. My heart was a storm under my ribs. But I smiled. Everyone was watching. My father's portrait on the front pew, my only family left, stared at me like he knew I shouldn't say yes, but I did. I said I do, and sealed my fate with a kiss that tasted like betrayal. I just didn't know it yet. Not until 5 minutes later, when the attorney my new husband called a family friend handed me a document, right there, at the altar. While people were still clapping, it was a signature request, a contract, and with it, the first slap from the man I had just married. I looked at him, confused. "Just a prenup," he whispered, smiling for the photos. "Routine." My fingers went cold as I scanned the page. It wasn't a prenup. It was a transfer of everything. My father's inheritance, the property he'd left me, the house, the stocks, my grandmother's jewelry locked in that safe. Gone, all to my husband. "Sign it, babe, just formality," he said. But his eyes didn't match his tone. They were sharp, familiar, even, like I had seen them in courtrooms, not bedrooms, and I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I signed it, quietly. Because my heels were high, the guests were still filming, and I had been raised never to make a scene. But inside, a switch flipped. Something cracked. I knew I had been played. And worse, I had just walked into my own betrayal, smiling. The honeymoon suite was wrapped in white silk and lies. I remember standing by the window, the city glowing beneath us, while he ordered champagne like nothing had happened. I stared at the reflection in the glass. A bride, yes, but stripped of trust, of protection, of everything my father had worked for. He poured me a drink, held it out, and said, "Now we can finally relax." I took the glass. I smiled, and I knew. This wasn't love. It was strategy. He hadn't married me. He'd acquired me, like a company, like real estate, like a fool with too much to lose and no one to warn her. The days that followed were a performance. He acted like the perfect husband in public, kissed my cheek at brunch, posted our wedding photos with captions like "Forever" and "My Queen." But every night, I felt it, the silence between us growing thicker. He didn't touch me unless the cameras were out. He didn't look at me unless I was holding something he wanted. I started digging, quietly. Phone records, financial trails, emails. He had planned this for months. My inheritance wasn't an accident. It was a target. And I was just the final lock he needed to pick. One night, I found a folder on his laptop labeled "Exit Strategy." My breath caught. Inside were documents, fake correspondence, plans to move assets into an offshore account, and divorce papers, already signed. Dated just 6 months after the wedding. I sat there in the dark, shaking. He never wanted me. He wanted what I carried. And when it was gone, he'd vanish. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That's the thing about being underestimated. It becomes your greatest weapon. He thought I'd cry, he thought I'd beg, but I stayed quiet, memorized every file, every move, every name listed in his schemes. I created backups, hidden folders. I even opened a separate bank account in another city under my maiden name. While he posted selfies with captions like "power couple," I was documenting everything, because deep down, I wasn't planning to run. I was planning to rise, but to do that, I had to wait for the storm. And oh, it was coming. 3 months into the marriage, he began changing. Not in ways the world could see. He was still charming at parties. But at home, he grew impatient, cold. He stopped pretending. His compliments disappeared. His touch vanished. And then came the control, the suggestions about who I could see, what I should wear, how I should speak in public. I realized something. When a man steals from you, he doesn't just take money. He takes the voice you use to fight back, unless you reclaim it, quietly. That was when I started writing. Not a diary, A log, every word he said, every movement, names, dates, expressions. I wrote about how he looked at me like a deal closed, how his lawyer always seemed one step ahead, like I had no rights, no proof. But I did. I had time. I had patience. And I had nothing left to lose. He'd taken the inheritance, but he hadn't taken my will. Not yet. If this story resonates with you, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more people discover these true stories of silent power. It happened at a charity gala. I wore my mother's emerald earrings, the ones he said were too flashy for my new role as his wife. That night, I wore them anyway. He didn't like it. His jaw tightened when he saw me. But I smiled, looped my arm through his, and played the game. We danced, we laughed. We mingled with people who had no idea he was planning to leave me ruined. But under the golden lights, I noticed something new. He was nervous. His hands were sweaty. His phone buzzed more than usual. And when I caught a glimpse of the screen, I saw a name I'd never seen before, under a heart emoji. I excused myself, walked calmly to the restroom, and locked the stall door. My hands were shaking, but not from pain, from focus. I had suspected an affair, but this wasn't just cheating. This was a pattern, a new player in his game, maybe a replacement, maybe an accomplice. I took a deep breath, looked at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "Let him think you're weak." Because soon, he'd learn that nothing is more dangerous than a woman who's already lost everything, except her resolve. That night, I copied the number. Days later, I traced it. It belonged to someone in his law firm, not just someone, his assistant, young, attractive, and recently promoted. I found emails, messages, photos. He had promised her things, a life, my life, but he was still legally married to me, and still pretending nothing was wrong. So I smiled at breakfast, kissed his cheek like always, and began setting my own table for war. I started visiting a local cafe 3 times a week, not for the coffee, but for the corner table with no cameras. I needed a place to think, plan, breathe. That's where I met Carla, a retired paralegal who noticed me one afternoon staring at a stack of legal documents. "Prenup gone wrong," she joked. I looked up, eyes tired, smile faint, and that's how the seed of my comeback was planted. I didn't tell her everything, not at first, but she saw through the silence. There's a way women recognize other women who've been quietly cornered. Carla started explaining things, loopholes, timelines, what counts as coercion, what's admissible in court. She helped me identify the weak links in his setup, the flaws in his airtight contract. If he forced you to sign anything under emotional pressure at the altar, that document may not be as valid as he thinks, she said. My mind began to turn like clockwork. For the first time in weeks, I felt it, hope. Not the fragile, naive kind, the sharp kind, the kind you forge when you've been burned but not broken. Back home, I began making copies of everything. Paperwork he thought I didn't understand. Transactions he believed were invisible. I even got into the storage unit he kept off-site, the one he thought I didn't know about. Inside were boxes labeled with my name, receipts, photos, even surveillance notes from before we married. My skin went cold. He had tracked me before he proposed. It was never love. It was always leverage. Every morning, I played the part. Breakfast in silk, small talk about real estate, kisses on the cheek before he left for meetings. But inside, I was cataloging everything. I learned how to smile without showing my teeth, how to nod without agreeing. Because when a predator believes you're tame, he doesn't expect you to bite. And he never saw me coming. Not once. What he didn't know is that I had already filed a request with a forensic accountant, anonymously. Carla helped me find the right one. Within a week, we had preliminary findings, off-the-record transfers, payments made to ghost accounts, luxury purchases made in my name without consent, things I could now prove, things he'd have to answer for. But I didn't confront him. I let him keep digging his own grave. One evening, he came home late, lipstick on his collar. I asked nothing. I simply smiled and handed him his favorite drink. He grinned. "You're finally relaxing," he said. I nodded. "Maybe I'm learning from you." He laughed and didn't notice the second glass I poured, untouched. That night, while he slept like a man with no conscience, I opened his briefcase and scanned a new document, a transfer of our remaining joint assets to a business registered in his mistress's name. It was dated for next week. That's when I knew. The final phase of his plan had begun, but so had mine. The next morning, I woke up early, before him. I stood at the edge of the bed, watching his peaceful face, so smug, so sure that I was still his to manipulate. He didn't know that every night he slept beside me, I was building the storm he couldn't see. That day, I went to the courthouse, quietly, no makeup, no perfume, just purpose. I filed for a motion of asset protection based on coercion and fraud. The clerk barely looked at me, but I felt it. A line had been crossed. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was moving. Later that afternoon, I met with Carla and the forensic accountant in a dusty conference room above an old bookstore. It felt poetic. We laid out the final map, every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every lie dressed in legal language. There it was, my inheritance, stripped down to data points, but also the keys to his undoing. "This," Carla said, pointing to a timestamp on a wire transfer, "is where we break him." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded. It was time. Back at home, he was on the phone, whispering, probably with her. I watched him from the hallway, half hidden. "Yes, baby," he murmured. "We're almost clear." Almost. That word rang in my ears like a bell toll. He was wrong. He wasn't almost clear. He was almost caught. It arrived on a Wednesday, a courier envelope with my name in bold black letters. Inside, divorce papers, irreconcilable differences. No warning, no conversation, just signatures. Cold, calculated. Attached was a letter from his lawyer requesting a fair and peaceful division of assets. I laughed, out loud, for the first time in weeks. Fair? He had already gutted my inheritance, stolen my name, mocked my silence, and now he wanted to finish the job. Neatly? No, not this time. I took a photo of the envelope and forwarded it to Carla with a single word. "Incoming." She responded in seconds. "Let him file. He has no idea what's waiting for him." I had already countersigned the document, but under legal advisement, we attached a motion that froze the division of assets until further investigation. His little scheme, wrapped in expensive paper, had just become evidence in a much bigger case. And now he'd be the one explaining things to a judge. That night, he walked in humming, playing the role of the betrayed husband. "Tough day," I asked softly. "I know it must be hard for you." He blinked, cautious. "You got the papers?" I nodded. "Yes. Thank you for making it so official." He smiled, believing I had folded. He kissed my forehead. I let him, because sometimes letting someone think they've won is the last move before you close the door. The first hearing was set for a Monday morning. He showed up in a navy suit, flanked by his sharp-jawed lawyer and fake confidence. I walked in alone, in a simple black dress and my mother's earrings. No entourage, no performance, just presence. He didn't look at me. But I felt his nerves the moment the judge mentioned allegations of fraudulent coercion. He shifted in his seat. His lawyer leaned in. And that's when I knew. They hadn't expected me to fight. The judge allowed a motion to unseal private financial records based on the evidence I submitted. Transfers made in my name. Signature inconsistencies. The judge looked directly at my husband. "You'll need to explain these." His voice cracked when he spoke. "It's a misunderstanding." But no one in that room bought it. Not anymore. I didn't need to scream. I didn't even need to speak much. My silence was thunder. Outside the courtroom, he finally approached me. "What are you doing?" he hissed. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a man who never expected the quiet girl to fight back. "I'm just protecting what's mine," I whispered. "You taught me how." He paled, then walked away, fists clenched. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was running, and I had just begun. 2 weeks later, she appeared, the assistant, his mistress. Her heels clicked nervously across the courtroom floor as she was called to testify in a separate deposition. She tried to act polished, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. I sat quietly, watching the woman he thought could replace me, not out of jealousy, but out of clarity. She wasn't the problem. She was a pawn, too, and soon the truth would make her unravel. Under questioning, her voice cracked. When asked about the business registered in her name, she blinked rapidly. He told me it was just paperwork, but the emails said otherwise. We had them printed, highlighted, his instructions, her responses, a clear trail. My attorney slid them across the table. She looked at them, then at me, and that's when something shifted. For a moment, her gaze softened. She realized she wasn't the winner of some love triangle. She was another woman used and discarded. Like I had been. Only I got up. After the hearing, I found her in the restroom. We didn't speak, just stood beside each other, washing our hands. She wouldn't meet my eyes, but before leaving, she whispered, "He said you'd never fight." I turned to her slowly. He said a lot of things, and with that, I walked out, heels clicking like thunder. Because now, even his mistress wasn't standing with him. He was alone. Finally, the articles began trickling in. At first whispers in legal blogs, then louder in financial news. Prominent consultant under investigation for asset misappropriation. His photo appeared beside words like fraud and coercion. He still walked with a straight back, still held onto his phone like it was a weapon, but his eyes, they betrayed him, bloodshot, empty. He was losing control. And for a man like him, that was worse than prison. The court ordered a freeze on all joint assets pending investigation. The house he once called his trophy was now locked in litigation. He could no longer sell, hide, or transfer anything. And the best part, the new company he started, the one built on my inheritance, was exposed as a shell, a hollow name registered under a false address. His empire was collapsing, brick by brick, and I didn't have to lift a single finger, just present the truth. He tried to call me that night, 10 times. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My voice had already spoken where it mattered. In signed affidavits, in sealed exhibits, in the quiet elegance of justice moving in silence, he messaged me, "We can fix this, please." I turned off the screen. He thought I'd still want closure. What he never understood was, I wasn't looking to fix it. I was building something new. Without him. The day I took the stand, the courtroom was hushed. I wore a navy suit, the same shade he once said made me look too cold. I wanted that. I wanted every word I said to land with precision, not emotion. But as I raised my hand to swear in, I felt something stir deep in my chest. Not fear, not anger, just clarity. I wasn't there to destroy him. I was there to reclaim what he stole, not just the inheritance, but my right to exist without being erased. I testified calmly, chronologically. I presented the documents, the altered signatures, the financial timeline. I told them about the moment he slipped that contract in my hands, right after the kiss at the altar, and how I signed it while guests were still clapping. I could see jurors shift uncomfortably. A woman across the aisle bit her lip. They felt it, the humiliation, the manipulation, the betrayal dressed in white roses and champagne. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I was the evidence. When I stepped down, I passed by him. He couldn't meet my gaze. His face was pale. His lawyer was whispering furiously. The courtroom was silent, except for the rustle of paper and a clock ticking somewhere behind us. I walked back to my seat with my head held high. No applause, no victory music, just the sound of quiet power. And for once, it was mine. Weeks passed. Court days blurred into strategy meetings, filings, and quiet nights where I stared at ceiling shadows, wondering how much of me had been lost and how much had been reborn. Then, on a gray Thursday morning, the verdict came. The judge's voice was steady, deliberate. The marriage contract signed at the altar. Invalid due to undue pressure. All post-marital transfers, reversed, joint accounts, frozen, pending restitution, and the inheritance, returned. Every dollar, every title, every piece of me he thought he could take, handed back like stolen artifacts uncovered after war. But more than the money, it was his face. That's what stayed with me. Watching him sit there, breathless, as the consequences finally touched him. Not a show, not a threat, but real consequences. Legal, personal, public. The courtroom didn't cheer. No one clapped. Justice never needs a drum roll. It simply lands. Quiet, final, undeniable. Outside, as I stepped into the daylight, reporters rushed past me. They weren't shouting my name. They were chasing his. He was the scandal now, the cautionary tale, the one who built his power on a woman's silence and forgot that silence can roar. A month after the verdict, I stood alone inside the house I almost lost, my father's house. The windows were open. The air smelled like lavender and freedom. I had replaced the security system, changed the locks, even repainted the study, not to erase the past, but to claim it. The old photos were back on the shelves. The books he once mocked lined the walls again. My world was mine, piece by piece, breath by breath. The media frenzy died down quickly. He settled, quietly, desperately. His career didn't survive the scandal. The clients fled. His mistress left. His name became a warning in corporate circles. And me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I simply rebuilt, slowly, intentionally. I launched a legal fund for women coerced into signing away their futures. I used part of the restored inheritance to hire a team. Carla was the first person I called. She cried. "You didn't just win," she said. "You turned it into something sacred." Sometimes I still get messages from women I'll never meet. They write things like, "You reminded me I'm not crazy," or "I was too scared to fight until your story." And that, more than any courtroom victory, is what keeps me walking forward, quietly, confidently, unshaken. It was a cold morning when I received the final envelope. This time, it wasn't from him. It was from the court. Official confirmation that the restitution had been processed, that his appeal had been denied, and that the divorce was finalized with all assets reverted. I stood by the window, letter in hand, breathing in the silence. It wasn't joy I felt, not revenge, just closure. The kind you sign with your own pen, not his, the kind you earn with patience, not rage. I sat at my father's old desk, the same one he used to write me birthday letters when I was a girl, and signed one last document, my new foundation, a nonprofit for women who lost everything and need help finding their way back. I signed it slowly, carefully. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel it. The weight of survival, the power of rebirth, the strength of a woman no longer hiding behind anyone's last name. That night, I walked barefoot through the house, lights dim, floor warm beneath me. I poured a glass of wine, not to celebrate, but to honor the woman I became, the one who didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't break, the one who simply endured and transformed. I raised the glass to no one in particular and whispered, "They expected me to disappear. I didn't." Thank you for watching until the end. If you've ever lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the loudest impact is made in silence.